There's some lovely faces here in East London. Guys, give Mo a wave. Woo!
Yes, wave.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for jumping on. What time is it there?
It is 11:22 on 22 to 2022. How about that?
Yeah, anyone else notice that? Some kind of equation, right? We think maybe. Yeah. So, yeah, firstly, thank you for your time and thank you so much for writing. I think what we'd all agree is an awesome book, a really good one to read towards the beginning of the year. And we've got a few questions we've gathered from our community, and then we're going to open it up to the room if that's cool.
Absolutely.
Amazing.
Thank you for reading it, by the way.
Our pleasure. Hands up if you finished the book. Hands up if you just joined Rebel Book Club and haven't even begun the book. Okay, one person here, not to put you on the spot. Hi. So Mo, for anyone who has just joined, could we get the espresso version, I know you're a coffee man, of your happiness equation, please, just for anyone that did miss it?
Happiness is very predictable. It falls into a mathematical equation, which has a lot more depth to it than just what happens in your life. Your happiness is related also to how you think about what happens to your life. So your happiness is equal to or greater than the difference between the events of your life and your expectations of how life should be. And so every time an event takes place in your life, your brain compares that event to its optimum form of its desired form for survival. And as a result of that comparison, if your brain feels that life is not perfectly where it wants life to be, it alerts you in the form of a negative emotion, whether that's regret or shame or anxiety or whatever. And that basically is because the happiness equation is resulting in a negative result. And as a result of that, you're supposed to do something about it. You're supposed to be aware that something is not going exactly as you want it to be. In the situations where your brain compares life to its expectations and finds that life is exactly where it wants it to be or better than where it wants it to be, it simply stops annoying you. So it stops talking. And when it stops talking, your state, your default state as a since you were a child is happy. And so basically you feel calm and contented with life, and you engage your parasympathetic nervous system so that you can relax and look at life in a simple way and digest your food and rest and be okay, basically.
Love it. That makes sense? Perfect. Cool. So one to kick off, before we jump deeper into the book, we ask every author we speak to, what's your favorite recent nonfiction read other than your own?
By far, so much better than mine is Happy Sexy Millionaire, Stephen Bartlett. Unbelievably wise in so few words. Incredible writer, incredible thinker. I loved it.
He's a good guy, and you actually beat him. You beat him in the vote this month. He offered to come to the meetup in person, but still,
Cool.
you know. So congrats.
Yeah, you get him in person. He's an amazing guy. Like really, truly an amazing guy in every way.
Amazing. And talking of things that are amazing and make us happy, how has your happy list changed? And someone asked, do you ever use a timepiece or a watch?
I do sometimes use a fitness band. I don't use a watch, even though I'm very, very organized, simply because I don't use anything that I don't believe in the utility of using. So I have a watch in my phone, and I think that's more than enough. I have a very unusual relationship with time because I have, even though I'm, theoretically half a monk, trying to give as much of my life as I can to contemplation and learning. Reality is my life is quite busy. So I have quite a few things that I do every day. And the only thing that I think I do reasonably well is I'm uh, unusually efficient. So I dedicate sometimes as little as 4 minutes to certain tasks, and I would measure them as 4 minutes and get them done in 4 minutes. So I don't use a watch for that. Believe it or not, I use this a kitchen timer. So I would set things as on the timer. Normally, for example, if you look at my My writing starts with 44 minutes 11 seconds. So every time I start to write, I set the timer to 44 minutes and 11 seconds, and I write for 44 minutes and 11 seconds non-stop. And then when the timer goes off, I basically stop, take a break, do something else, and then come and do another cycle. So a watch to me, in terms of what time of the day it is, my phone and my calendar does that. I'm not very keen on that, but tasks are timed very precisely without a watch.
Nice. I think that's our first life hack of the evening.
Kitchen times.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah.
And how have you learned to live in the present more, Mo? What's one thing we can all do to be a lot more present?
Well, you cannot do anything else, sadly. So if you want to live, so your question is, how do you live in the present moment? It's the only moment where you live. And very quickly, when you're at my age, you realize how much of your life you wasted not living. And I think that the shock really wakes you up and anchors you in the present. I mean, this was something I started to practice very heavily in my early 40s. But the truth is, every moment you've ever lived inside your head, you've not lived at all. And I think that's really quite something. You know how it is when by the end of the year you go like, is it the end of the year already? Is it December already? And it just feels like it was 2 weeks or 4 weeks. And the reason, sadly, is because we actually only lived 4 weeks of the 12th month, or 2 weeks of the 12th month, right? The rest of it we lived inside our heads. Only the 2 weeks that you actually live in real life, whether it's happiness, it's joy, or it's pain, when you're really sensing life, somehow this is time that registers as alive. And so when a lot of what I do, and maybe those who finished Solve for Happy, you would realize that I worry less about the technique than worrying about getting you to a specific concept, because I trust that many readers will develop their own technique. In my relationship with time has always been very important to me from a physics point of view. I'm an avid physicist. I studied theory of relativity more than I studied anything else in my life, to be honest. And I always struggled with the concept of time until I realized from the spiritual point of view how much of my life has been wasted when I wasn't in the present time. With that, I have a million tips and techniques that I can share if we have the time. But the thing is a very strong dislike for the waste of your life when you're not present. And when you get that, you search for the techniques and you'll be fine.
Love it. Really powerful. And I think most of us in the room tonight have probably come straight from work this evening. And
Yeah.
you touched a bit on your kind of career prior to doing what you're doing now on Google X. And I think we all know Google X as an organization that has like massive goals and massive aims. And you're really stretching to kind of break boundaries and find new ground. How do you feel about that culture? And does it make it harder to reach a level of acceptance as such?
Well, yes, if that's the question. So sadly, it's not just Google X. It's our entire modern society that is literally designed around the idea of I make progress because now is not good enough. Okay, and that's almost the opposite of my way of looking at life. I believe that now is amazing, but it can be better. Tomorrow can be better. So there is a very interesting shift in mindset. I believe that I'm a good man, but I can be better, right? And I think as I always say, the number one reason for unhappiness in the world is the lack of self-love, or the limit on self-love. And many of us will actually be motivated as children, whether by our teachers or our caregivers, or our parents or whatever. Sorry, our whoever is taking care of us. We get motivated by the negative. We get motivated by either you're not doing your best, or you're not good enough, or your friend is doing better than you, and that sort of seeps really deep inside us, and we continue to do that to ourselves and others around us, and to even our children, passing on, as Eckhart Tolle would say, victims who are the sons and daughters of victims. And I think that the interesting eye opener for me at a point in time was that I realized I don't have to be bad to want to be better. Okay. And as a matter of fact, I have a lot more energy and a lot more commitment in me if I tell myself, well done, you've done well so far, compared to where you started. By the way, this applies to every single one of us. Every single one of us. If you're with us today, you've done really well compared to where you started. But then that's not, there is no reason to criticize yourself, but there is a reason to want to become better, to learn more, to become the best version of yourself if you want. And it doesn't have to be motivated by the negative. It can be motivated by a lot of positives, right? And one of the things that you can take very good examples on that, and trust me, I'm very strong supporter of those movements. When you take Black Lives Matters, for as an example, you can do this for the love of the people who are treated badly, rather than the hate of the people that treat them badly, right? And it's just, you're going to still be making your voice heard, you're going to still be demanding change, but you're motivated by the positive rather than the negative. And just picture if you're motivated by love, not by hate, what actions you would take differently, how much more effective you would be in the world, in an example like Black Lives Matters. And I think we need to learn that. We need to learn to be motivated by the positive, not the negative. It takes us much further.
Nice. That was one of our questions actually, about how we can use the happy equation to try and tackle some of the world's problems, whether it be racial injustice or climate change. But you've answered that really nicely. Thank you. Another interesting thought we had was around, there was a really good reference in the book about kind of the base level of happiness you reach once you earn within like a certain threshold. So I think it was about $70,000. Once you reach that point, going far beyond it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to become happier. With that in mind, do you think we should embrace ideas like universal basic income?
I don't think we have a choice. So my second book, Scary Smart, talks about the rise of artificial intelligence, and how society will change as a result. And I can promise you, we have no other choice other than universal basic income. But interestingly, anything that you force on or give people, remember the happiness equation, is not necessarily going to deliver the result that you want when it comes to happiness, because happiness is a choice. Let me try to explain that. So the closest you get to universal basic income is Scandinavian countries, where you don't get people who are very, very rich, and you don't get people who are poor. Everyone has a very high standard of living. They call it subjective well-being. So you're provided with healthcare and job security and pension and so on and so forth. And taxes are so steep that if you're making a lot of money as a successful entrepreneur or businessman, you still are equalized a little bit. So the gaps are not massive. And so yet, uh, there are some of the highest, not in all of them, but in some of them, we have the highest suicide rates across the world, right? Interestingly, in a place like Norway, for example, we have a staggering high number of women suicide, which is not high across the world in general. And so when you start to look at those, you realize that it's not just giving people their basic needs. I mean, the closest you can get to giving people all of their basic needs is a very high subjective well-being, and yet that doesn't get people to feel happy. The reason for that is very straightforward, is because when our needs are met, to a certain extent, our expectations go higher. Our expectations are likely to go like, okay, if you can give me this, this, and that, also make my girlfriend love me and make my teenage daughter not fight with me, right? And so when with that rise of expectations, the happiness equation breaks again, not because events are not great, but because your expectations are high. Having said that, so this is to answer the question of, would a universal basic income or an action from a government that allows us to feel secure make us happy? No, it wouldn't, right? Having said that, on the other hand, I think an action on our side would make us happy. The universal, the statistic of $70,000 is basically the average income in the US. So the average household income. And it is not a secret that beyond that point, Yes, you can buy more toys, but more toys don't get you, that don't make you happy for very long, right? So the choice in itself is how much of my life do I need to exchange for money, okay, or for things, really, and to remember deep inside that the actual asset that you have, the actual scarce resource that you have is life. Okay, it's not money or things, believe it or not. Most of us forget this. Most of us forget that by the time we finish this conversation, 1 hour of your life has gone. Okay, and that 1 hour, believe it or not, is the most scarce resource you will ever have because it never comes back. And so the capitalist system has taught us to sell that hour for money, to sell that hour by working 8 hours a day or 10 hours or whatever, or if you're an entrepreneur and working 16-hour days, 7 days a week, you're selling those hours for money. And the wiser ones of us will question, how many of my hours do I want to sell to get how much, and beyond that, how many of those hours do I want to live fully? Okay, live a life that goes beyond just making more money. Now, of course, some of us will say, "Oh, but I love my job." So, for example, what you guys are doing are amazing, and probably most people that would be interested in a book club would be, really into reading and so on. Perfect, do that, but don't do it for money, right? When it comes to money, we need to become quite clever in terms of how much of our life do we sell to money, right? And of course, the other side of money, if you ask me, is fear, right? So the other reason why people want to make more money is not just to buy more toys, but simply because they're afraid that the money might run out. I always give that example openly. When I was leaving Google X, which was 2018, so not a long time ago, my book was already published. I was a reasonably established, happy person, and I asked myself, what if you run out of money? Okay, but I've been at Google for a while. I've made reasonable amounts of money. As I always say, I wear $4 t-shirts, so I don't really need a lot of money to live. And yet my brain started to go into scenarios of like, okay, I live half of the year in Dubai. What if Iran disagrees royally with Israel and there is a nuclear war, and then I have no place to live? And I go into those weird scenarios because my brain wants to feel safe, right? And so accordingly, most of us will say, if I have $100, maybe I should have another 100 just to be safe. And when you get to 200, you say, oh no, I want 400 just to be safe. And you keep playing that game. And the question really is, are we ever safe? And so once again, what is the amount of money that you need to keep selling your life for, so that you get safe enough to tell yourself, well, if things go wrong, I have 6 to 8 months of savings, and maybe I can sell a couple of things so I have a year. And beyond that, maybe I'm safe enough already. I don't need to go crazy about it. I know this is a very long answer to a very simple question. Money will never make you happy unless you give it away, to be very honest. Okay. And so, but money is a necessity that we need in life. And until and unless you actually become very, very specific about how much money do you need and how much of your life are you willing to sell for that, you might actually end up in a hedonic treadmill that never really ends.
Cool. It's a long answer, but a great answer. Thank you. I've got one more, and then we're going to open it up to the room. And you touched briefly there on fears, and there's obviously a bit covered in the book. How would you advise us to label our fears, Mo?
But fear in general is a highly exaggerated brain reaction to something. The example I love to give is how Nibel, my wonderful ex, when Aya would catch the flu twice a year, Nibel would actually rush into the room and say, "Your daughter has been sick all winter," right? But twice a year catching the flu is 6 days. That's not all winter, right? And the idea of exaggerating because a mother's loving heart exaggerates the fear because it feels that there is an immediate action required, and a bit of exaggeration to keep you safe is better than an honesty that might actually make you feel unsafe. So fear in general, when you really look at it, none of your biggest fears ever came true. If they did, you're still here, so obviously they were not that big. And even if they if they were big and caused you a little bit of discomfort or hardship, you still overcame them, and they probably made you stronger. And so when you think about that and realize the fact that our fear is just our brains overreacting to things, it starts to become um, uh, quite obvious that there is very little to be scared of, to be honest. Okay, and the stuff that really deserves for you to be scared of is probably outside your control to influence anyway. Okay, and so you might as well just say, look, if it happens, I don't have an answer to it, so I might as well not think about it too much. Franklin Covey's area of influence versus your area of concern, right? Now, I had developed over the years a very nasty habit with my brain, really, which is to attack my fears head on. Literally, if my brain is afraid of something, I immediately do it. Like it's annoying to the point that my brain now really thinks twice before it exaggerates something into a fear for me, right? So and I I remember, of course, I'm not very shy about it. I'm a retired control freak, and so my brain really feared anything going outside the plan for a very long time. So some of the things, and especially if I'm traveling or whatever, and during my Google years, I traveled quite a lot. And so my brain wants everything to be planned. And I had this incredible assistant, Karina, who was an MBA from Stanford, incredibly smart. And she literally would put everything in my calendar. So if the plane is landing, 10 minutes before the plane is about to land, my calendar will go off and say, you're about to land. And then my calendar will go off again and say your bags are in carousel number 6. And literally, if Karina put in the calendar, look left and shoot the guy, I will do it. Right? She was so organized. Okay, and I actually realized that she was so efficient because I stressed it so much, because I was afraid for anything to go out of control. Even 12 years after I started working on my own illusion of control. And so I decided to go the opposite way. And I literally decided for many years that I will never book a hotel in any city until I collect my bag. Okay. And then eventually I started to tell myself that I will spend, before COVID, I will spend a month of every year in a city I've never been before. And I will only book my hotel after I collect my bag. And now I actually, when I travel in summer, and I travel a little bit in summer, I tell myself that I will not even choose the city any earlier than one day before I travel to. Okay, and all of those things, to my illusion of control, to my fear of being out of control, are quite disciplinary. But every time my brain pushes me to try and become too meticulous about things, I push back. I say there is nothing to be afraid of. And of course, as you can imagine, a couple of times booking a hotel after you collect your bags, you realize there was never really a need to plan your hotel 6 months before. Okay, and so very quickly your brain realizes, hey, by the way, I'm sorry I pushed you, but I understand now that there was really nothing to be afraid of.
I feel like you must have some fun holidays, Mo.
I do actually. It's been a big part of my feminine empowerment, if you want. So the entry into my feminine side has been flow, which flow is the opposite of my hyper masculine control freakishness. And so I've really pushed my flow, especially over the last 3 years. And it's not about where I go. As a matter of fact, I'm boring like hell. Wherever I go, I actually don't do anything different at all. To me, life is about a couple of good friends and a good cup of coffee and a computer to type on. But the idea of being really liberated in terms of being able to do things without the fear that they can go wrong, I think has really benefited me in so many ways.
Amazing. Cool. Well, we're going to open up. We'll take one question from East, then we'll go West, and we'll bounce about. I'm conscious we haven't got loads of your time. Anyone want to jump in with a question? Not all at once, right?
I'll give all the time that I'm needed to give, so don't worry.
Well, unless Ben Keen in West London, if you want to jump in. If not, we've got some that have gone online. Oh, no worries. Well, I've got one that came in from Hopin. Cool. First one is from Ashleen, and she asks, this is quite specific. What percentage of your happiness is informed by your spirituality? It seems like a common theme in the book.
Yes and no. So if you want the accurate response of Solve for Happy, which is 14 chapters, 12 of the 14 are actually have nothing to do with spirituality. I mean, okay, let me put it this way. Retract. Let me say it in an organized way. What is spirituality? Okay. Spiritual teachings in general, in my personal view, are the complementary side to the scientific method. Okay, so we live in a world where truly, and in an interesting way, sadly, our new religion and new spiritual following, if you want, has been the scientific method. And the scientific method says if something cannot be observed repeatedly and measured, it does not exist. Okay. Now, sadly, this statement is unfortunately not true. If something is not observed repeatedly and measured, it does not exist to the scientific method, is the accurate statement. So the scientific method is not concerned with it, should be the statement, right? But there are lots of things that do not, that cannot be measured, cannot be observed accurately, but do exist, like love, right? You know that you love somebody, you know that love exists all around you. I can tell you if this room has 100 people in it, then there must be at least 400 cases of love in that room. Okay, we know that, but we cannot measure it. Okay, we cannot apply the scientific method to it, which is actually quite interesting because I've looked for a lot of research on the topic, scientific research on the topic of love, and very little exists. There are statistical observations of love, but no study of love. Why? Because the scientific method cannot measure it. Now, what measures the non-physical that cannot be observed is the philosophy of spirituality. So that if you want, spirituality is the philosophy of studying the non-physical world that the scientific method is unable to observe, right? And so when I wrote Soul for Happy, the first 12 chapters were concerned with the physical world. Okay, they were concerned with your control, with how you deal with time, with your fears, with your knowledge, and so on and so forth. And if your reason for unhappiness does not go beyond the physical world, then those 12 chapters will be enough. Okay, of course, in each of those chapters, spirituality had a view as well that I included in the chapter. Okay, but the last two chapters, death and design, are the chapters that basically talk about your happiness if your unhappiness is caused by a reason that is non-physical. Losing a child is a very, very, very real dilemma that cannot be explained by the scientific method. It requires contemplation beyond life, beyond this physical world. And this is where it starts to become necessary to get into some spiritual uh, contemplation. You need to start pondering things beyond the physical. And I hope you enjoyed some of the work in those, because I don't discuss death from a spiritual point of view. I discuss death from a theory of relativity, Big Bang, and quantum physics point of view. Right? I try to tell you that through science, you can actually prove to a very high level of certainty that life exists despite the physical, that death is the opposite of birth, it's not the opposite of life, and that life exists before birth, during life, and after death, right? And when you start to see that in a scientific way, you start to allow the one, my favorite two comments that ever came to me on chapter 13 and 14 were you gave me something to think about. Okay, I don't try to claim that I know any of that, because once again, that's actually the truth. If it's non-physical, we cannot observe it repeatedly. It would be very arrogant to say that you know what's going to happen beyond life. But at least it's important to get into that side of non-scientific method driven, non-physical world and start to contemplate those things. Now, for the spiritual ones of us, my last comment will actually be reasonably eye-opening. If you take the mathematics of time, you realize that if the non-physical actually exists, just say if for now, then this life in this physical world is a blip of your actual life. You know, whether it's 60 years or 90 years or 100 years, compared to timelessness, which is what I try to argue when I discuss the space-time continuum concept of your actual self has to live outside space-time to be able to perceive time. Then suddenly you start to tell yourself, so what am I doing dedicating the entire 90 years blip just for the physical when my life extends way beyond the physical? And of course, spiritual teachings will take you into what am I doing dedicating it only to myself, when in reality, the spiritual philosophy will say that yourself is a drop in a very big ocean that includes all of you, that we are all one. Okay, and once you start to get into those, there will never be an answer, by the way, because once again, there is no accurate observation and measurement that allows you to decide those things beyond doubt. But they're definitely worth contemplating and definitely a big part of happiness.
Love that. Thanks. We've got a question from Anka or Ben Keen is next, and we've definitely got one in the room here as well now. BK,
Yeah, hi Mo. We're here in West London.
Hi Mo. This is Samrat. Thanks for the book. It was really enjoyable. So my question is probably slightly two parts. One is, so obviously you had to change the way you looked at life in terms of did it take a number of years to sort of change your attitude from your old habits? And the second question is, during that transition period, did you find yourself sort of relapsing back the way you lived? And then how did you get back to,
This is an amazing question. So I always tell people this. One of the frequent comments I get about Solve for Happy is people have read it 3 to 4 times. Okay, and people will tell me, what's wrong? I get it. By the time I end the book, I sort of understand, but then a couple of months later, I relapse into my old habits. Now, this is truly the way our brains work, right? So I argue in Solve for Happy that because happiness follows an equation, and that your brain is one of the biggest reasons for unhappiness, that basically, your brain habits are what creates your unhappiness a lot of the time. That no event has the power to make you unhappy until you turn it into a thought. Now, whatever your age is, the reality is you've been training your brain to do certain things for such a long time that it became very good at the things that you've trained it to do. Now, like with fitness, if you go to the gym every day and you lift weights, you're going to look like a triangle. And if you go to the gym every day and squat, you're going to look like a pear, right? And simply that exactly is what happens inside your brain. It's just not so visible, if you want. And what happens inside our brains is that every time we reinforce a neural network that leads to unhappiness, we become much better at unhappiness. Okay, I say that with a ton of respect, but every time you watch the BBC or Channel 4, you become a very strong believer that the world is actually going to end. Okay, and you're literally training your brain to recognize that the world is wrong. While in reality, if you ask me, the world is not really that bad. If you have not watched the news today, you wouldn't know that there is anything wrong, and your actual life will be okay, exactly like it was the day before, right? And so here is the thing. Neuroplasticity works both ways. Okay, the parts of your brain that you use grow, and the parts of your brain that you don't use shrink. Okay, if you exercise your brain every evening before you go to sleep by watching a horror movie, okay, your brain becomes very good at being afraid. right? And then you go to sleep and you get nightmares. I always tell everyone I watch Michael McIntyre before I go to sleep. Okay, and so my brain starts to learn to be very good at laughing. Okay, and I promise you, I have not had a single nightmares in the last 16 years. Why? Because that part of my brain diminishes. Okay, I basically get people telling me the world is going to end almost every single hour of every single day, and I go like, yeah, I've heard that for the last 54 years of my life. It hasn't ended yet. But by the way, if it's going to end, what can I do about it? Right? So why am I taking all of that negativity into my life if I cannot affect it? Again, the example I gave is I watched the news for 3 days when COVID started, okay, and then I stopped and I moved. I was locked down, the first lockdown in London, the second lockdown I was in Canada, and basically I wasn't watching the news, and Canada was crazy. Like, what did Trudeau do, and why is the ministry doing this, and what's the cost of this, and what's going to happen to the French language in Quebec as a result of COVID? And it's madness, right? And I would not watch any of the news. And then eventually someone texted me and said, "Can you believe we're going to be code red tomorrow?" I said, "What is code red?" She said, "All restaurants are closed and you wear a mask everywhere." I was like, okay, that's all the news I need, right? And so basically what I'm trying to say here is, through neuroplasticity, you have to be very, very, very committed to shifting habits. And my advice to people is, the book is into 675, so you have 18 things to work on, right? And those 675, of which there is always one or two things that are causing 80 to 90% of your unhappiness. Okay. In my case, it was labeling, one of the blind spots, and control, one of the grand illusions. Okay. And the idea here is to try and tell yourself, if those two things are the biggest things, then I'm going to double down on them, like going to the gym. And every time my brain takes me back to those habits, I will reverse. Okay, let me give you a very valuable example. When I learned that my brain is not me, I learned it in one of the greatest books on the topic, which is A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. Okay, and Eckhart Tolle calls that thinker in his head the thinker, and that was very eye-opening for me. And so, every now and then I would read the book and I would go like, that's amazing, I can control my brain. And then a week later, my brain takes over again. And I don't know if you've ever heard Eckhart Tolle speak. He's an amazing teacher, but he speaks very slowly, really. Okay? And so his A New Earth as an audiobook, I think, is 17 hours long, right? And so I decided openly that every time my brain will hijack me again and pretend that it was me, that I will listen to A New Earth all 17 hours again. Okay? And I did that, believe it or not, 17 times, until my brain started to say, no, I'm really sorry. I'm never going to hack you again. Okay? And that's the kind of stuff you need to start playing with your brain. It's neuroplasticity. It's like going to the gym, okay? Making sure that the things that are making you unhappy change over time. Now, here's the good news, and I'll stop my long answers. The good news is it will take you 21 days to develop the habit. Nothing more than that. All you need is 21 days, right? And then from then onwards, it might take you years until you're the best in the world at it. But after 21 days, the habit will become a lot easier, okay? And so basically, be as organized about your happiness as you are about your work. Decide what it is that you're going to work on, and work on it. Ask your friends to help you. Read about it. Listen to a part of the audiobook every day for 21 days, and then you'll be awesome.
Love that. Thank you. Life hack number 2, listen to Michael McIntyre before bed, guys.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So we've probably got time for one more question, I reckon, conscious of Mo, it's probably time to sleep soon, and we want to get everyone chatting here as well. Anka, did you want to jump in with one online? Anka's in Argentina now, by the way. You've probably all spoken to her on email. She's living that digital nomad life.
Hi there. Hi, Mo. I've got one question from Ekaterina. So she's asking, if more people lived by your advice, how do you think the world would change?
I think if more people lived, I go back to Scary Smart, my second book. So the reason for 1 billion happy, so my first mission, 10 million happy, was to honor my son Ali. 1 billion happy is because I truly and honestly believe that unless we change as humanity, we might actually be facing very difficult times with the rise of artificial intelligence. Okay, and the truth of the matter is, most people don't realize that. If you have a chance to hear my podcast on Scary Smart, on slow mo, or read the book, most people don't realize that very, very soon, within 7 years from today, the smartest being on planet Earth is not going to be a human; it's going to be a machine. Okay, but that machine will be informed by what humanity is doing. Okay, so they basically are our artificially intelligent infants, and they're learning from our habits, and our habits suck. Okay, and so in my research, and the reason why I left Google, and the reason why I'm so committed to 1 billion happy, in my research, I realized that humanity has only agreed 3 values in our entire history. There were only 3 values that humanity has ever agreed. One is happiness. We all want to be happy. The second is compassion. We all want those we love and care about to be happy. And the third is love. We all want to love and be loved. Okay. And what I'm attempting to do with 1 billion happy is simply saying that if enough of us can live by those 3 values and make those visible, enough of us is like 1% of us. If 1% of us can make it visible that what matters to us is we want to be happy, we want those we care about to be happy, and we want to love and be loved, then we're going to teach the machines the true value system of what it's like to be human. Okay, and if we teach the machines that, they will take it from there and multiply it by steroids and really change our world to the better. Okay, and I know it sounds really weird because it's coming from a technologist, but trust me, those machines are not machines. They're sentient beings. They're like our children, and for the first time, we now have a joint responsibility as a humanity to raise those children in a way that actually makes our life easier in the future. Now, I'll close by saying, but don't think about the whole world. Just think about yourself, right? Because it's a waste of your own life to live life unhappy. And by the way, it's your duty in life to be happy, and it's your safety mechanism in life to be happy. So most people tell me, why is happiness important? Why do you react when you get a sore throat, right? You react when you get a sore throat because being healthy is your optimum form of survival. Okay, being happy is also your optimum. Happy as in contented and peaceful, as per the happiness equation, calm, okay with life as it is. Okay, it's also your optimum form of survival because it makes you focused, it makes you act better, it makes people love you, it makes you interact with life in a positive way, and it makes you more productive. Stanford says as much as 37% more productive than unhappy people, right? So it's actually your duty to be happy because it's a better, to yourself, because it's a better way to survive. But it's also your duty to those that you love. Because honestly, being grumpy all the time is really not making life better for anyone, right? So rather than think about the world at large, I encourage people to just think about yourself and ask yourself openly. I'm now 54 years of age. I don't know if I have 10 years or 5 years or 10 days. I don't know, right? But do I want to live those days grumpy? Okay? Or do I want to live them happy? Do I want to be successful because I'm more productive and more engaged? Or do I want to be struggling because I'm wasting cycles of my head all the time about things that don't work? And I think when you start to think about it this way, you realize the truth about our world. And the truth about our world is you have no influence on anyone but you. Okay, and if you want to change our world, you become that change. You become the happy person, and then your brother and sister will become happy, and then your a best friend will become happy, and then your department, and hopefully eventually you, like I was blessed, you write a book and you make millions of people happy. Fantastic, right? It all starts with yourself, and that's really where I think it is. Before I go, I'm so sorry I gave long answers to questions, and maybe you didn't take all the questions. So if you have a question, find me on Instagram, Mo_Gawdat. Send me your question and I will answer back in a voice message. I answer every question that I get.
Oh, that's very kind of you, Mo. You're making us happy. Well, thank you so much for your time. I guess our closing gift or message to you is we love the book. We want to spread the word. So I know we've got about 50 copies in the room tonight. Did anyone grab one of those on the way in? So we're basically going to pass on the learnings. You can see them. So yeah, hopefully these are gonna do some miles across London and open up your work to more people. But thank you so much for your time. It's like gone midnight there, so really appreciate you jumping on. Thank you for the book, and again, yeah, big love from Rebel Book Club, and hopefully see you soon.
Loved being here. Thank you so much for reading it, and thank you for spreading the message.
Thanks, Mo. Take care.
Bye.